Good morning and welcome to the live series Straight Off the Bat, a show that provides expert advice on matters related to the financial sector and to share knowledge on key issues surrounding the economic development of Trinidad and Tobago. Join us on Thursdays as we speak to individuals across multiple industries who will help you understand financial literacy and education. If you join us on Facebook, smash that like button and follow our page to continue seeing content that will help you manage your money. Today, we are discussing the role of data in digital banking in Trinidad and Tobago. We're joined by David Hewick. He is the Senior Director Payments, Digital and Automation at RBC Caribbean. His financial services career has spanned, I want to say more than my lifetime, but it's not. It's not more than my lifetime, but it's 30 years. And across RBC, he has portfolios within business and having worked in insurance technology, global wealth management, retail and commercial banking in Canada, I think the wealth of knowledge he's bringing to this conversation is invaluable, and I hope you stick around. He's also married with 2 kids and is based in Canada, and we're going to find out a little bit about his handicap. So we'll see how his golfing swing is. Hi, David.
Good morning, and thank you for having me, and hello to everybody.
Awesome. So we're going to go straight into it because, when we open our eyes, inhale and exhale, there's this thing that we all have to live with. This is money, right? And during the course of the last 2 years within this space of having to survive with this new normal, with your, depth of knowledge, what is the biggest change you've seen within those 2 years?
I think that the change in the last 2 years has, in some senses, been dramatic because everybody's lived it, no matter where you are in the world. We've learned to live in this world where you spend much more time isolated and looking at screens and much less time in person. For banking, we felt that it's been cases where, we've been limited in our ability to have our staff in all of our branches in face-to-face, but thankfully we have our digital capability, we have our telephone banking capability, and what we've learned is those things, though they've always been there, became much more important for our customers to rely on, knowing that even though you might not be able to leave your home today, you can still get most of your financial services met, that you can still pay for things, even if you're paying for online food delivery. I think people in the last 2 years have really lived with how important those extra capabilities are. I think banking has been changing continuously for many, many decades. Some of us out there can remember when ATMs were a new thing. The idea that a machine could replace a teller. And telephones became a way to interact with your financial institution. And in the more recent years, online and mobile technology has come into play. And in the last 2 years, we learned just how important it was that customers still had access to their financial services, even when they didn't have physical access to our locations.
It's funny that you mentioned the ATM because I think it's so important, and there's parallels to this and with technology, because I remember reading somewhere it was about digital transformation. When the ATM was first introduced, there was this mass protest because they said a lot of people are going to lose jobs. It's going to shift the conversation. Actually, it was Freakonomics that I read. And, what happened is this evolution of what the actual person in the bank was going to do. So from where we are sitting here now, where we are accustomed to the ATM, it seems so normal. Obviously, the change brought this wave of protest. Are you seeing something similar with the transference to online banking?
I think only to a small extent. And in the beginning, I think there was certainly customers had concerns, they had questions that we needed to address in terms of ensuring them that they using a phone, for example, was safe. It is actually easier. It's empowering. If you're somebody who has difficulty traveling or needs help getting to the branch, the fact that if you have virtually any device, you can log on and get much of the same banking done without leaving your home, that actually became quite empowering. But it mattered that customers understood how it worked, that they realized that it was safe, and that they were getting some good value out of it. So I would say over the years, each of the new innovations that has come to financial services is sort of building on the experience of the past. And it's a great point about ATMs is despite all of the evolution we're doing to make things easier and faster, we continue to grow as an organization. So we're not shrinking to greatness in terms of our staff by any means.
Shrink into greatness. I'm going to use that in a future conversation somewhere. So let's step all the way back, because we're talking about the overview of what's been happening over the last 2 years, as well as, the changes that the bank is making to be part of the consumer now and their behavior. But when it comes to data, we usually associate it with a tech company. What does data mean in the banking space?
Sure. I think that the reference to tech companies is great because, I'll refer to a fairly famous quote that Bill Gates made, I think in 1994. He famously said, "Banking is necessary, banks are not." He meant that in the context of because of mobile phones. And what does that really mean? And we're seeing that now, is there are a number of financial services, particularly around payments, that are part of the digital economy, that are driven by those players, by the PayPals, by Google, by Amazon, by Shopify, by the fintechs, that are actually making use of the fact that this digital economy affords business opportunities, but all of it requires the ability to transact financially somehow. And so when we say we're doing something online, we're not physically sending cash, we're sending information about the money we have. And so we're in a world where banking has always been largely about information and data, and in a digital economy that's just becoming much more true, but the number of players in the ecosystem that we have to interact with is getting bigger.
I really need you to expand on what you just said there, because I think this is so important. This idea of, you physically have money in your phone, but what you just said is sending info about money you have. So for those who aren't familiar with online banking, who may be afraid of it, maybe you can give us, in a layman terms, what does that actually mean for someone who has their savings, who feel very passionate about seeing their physical money, for them to be more sort of, aware of what the bank is doing.
Sure. Yeah. When we talk about online banking and mobile banking, the reality is what we have is we have in our systems, we have data that describes our customers and their accounts, and that includes what is the value of the money in their account, what are the transactions they've executed. When we deliver a mobile banking app to you, we're not putting all that information on the phone. The phone is simply a window to see what is in your bank account at the bank. So we go to great lengths to protect that information and to make sure that the data that we have about your financial services, your accounts, your balances, your transactions, is safely inside the bank, and the phone is just a window to look at it.
but that was like my first experience with money. Very, very first experience.
I've been in banking since I was a teenager.
And welcome back to Straight Off the Bat. Thank you so much for joining us today. On Straight Off the Bat, we share advice on matters relating to finance, which affects all of us, and we share knowledge on key issues surrounding the economic development of Trinidad and Tobago. If you join us from LinkedIn, you can follow us, and don't forget to subscribe to continue seeing content and help you manage your money. And I don't know who doesn't need help managing their money. Everybody does, regardless of if you're Bill Gates or Elon Musk. That's a Twitter conversation. So today we're discussing the role of data in digital banking in Trinidad and Tobago with David Hewick. So David is actually in Ontario right now, so we're going to bring him in, and his decades long of experience, we're trying to squeeze as much information as possible from him today. And if you had missed our earlier conversation, we're talking about data, we're talking about why the banks ask for everything, including the blood type, because it feels like that sometimes. But it's all for your protection. And we, just before the break, we were talking about, making sure you're using the right passwords and things like that. So David, do you have any suggestions for first-time online banking users as to how they should approach passwords?
Yeah, passwords is a great area. It's one of those things where I do see a future where passwords eventually go away. But for many years, they're the best thing we've got, and it comes down to what are the ways that when you want to use your digital banking services online or on your device, that we can preset some secret that we share, that when you tell us that when you enter it, we can be certain that it's actually you, and that you have the confidence that only you can use this banking service. And for most of the time, that there are many ways that we guarantee that security. Password is one of them. Many banks also have second factor authentication with a token that generates a little number, or with personal verification questions, which are more questions. All of these are in the spirit of making sure that we're confident that we know that it's you talking to us, and that you're confident that you know that nobody else except you can actually access the device. Passwords, unfortunately, put some requirement on customers too, and we give as much advice and guidance as we can about your passwords, but generally the simple answer is you want to choose something that's easy to remember and hard to guess. And there's lots of simple ways to do that, but there are lots of ways that seem easy that for the bad guys are really easy to guess. So birthdays, names of family members, simple words. Unfortunately, those are pretty easy to guess, and they're pretty easy to compromise someone. So we generally provide advice to make sure that your password is complicated, and that's why often you'll get from different institutions different rules about what your password can be: upper and lower case, and a letter and a symbol, and no spaces, and this at least this long and not that long. Those rules are really sometimes hard to make sense of, but it's all designed to make sure that our customers have passwords that are hard for the bad guys to guess.
Yeah, for me, I use actually dreams and aspirations that I tell nobody of. And it's usually a sentence with some numbers and symbols in. So I don't know, guys, you could try it, So when it comes to this information, because for some folks it may seem overwhelming, especially in a specific age group. I know someone, my former landlord, he actually used to write his passwords in his book. And from someone who's like, okay, I have to remember all those things, and the bank is saying, okay, don't write it down. How else are we supposed to remember it?
Yeah, it's a conundrum. I am, there are a number of things with the technology today where on both Google phones and iPhones, for example, your password can be remembered by the system and it's protected on your device. I'll confess I use some of those because it's easier, but I would caution that the security of that capability is only as good as how well you protect the device in your phone yourself. So if you have your password saved on your phone and your phone doesn't have a password, then you're not protecting it at all. So there does need to be some education, some ability in terms of when you're using digital banking, that you need to be able to look out for your information. And not because your information will be specifically used to compromise your access to that particular financial institution, but in general, you want to protect your information online from all kinds of different scams that could be out there. And the principles of protecting your information, protecting your device, having those passwords, ideally not written down, or if you are writing them down, they're written down in a safe place. Those things are just good sort of digital health practices for anything that you do online to protect your information.
And for someone who's saying, "Oh gosh, I have to do all of this," what's the point? I could just go into the bank instead. What would you say to them?
I'd say you can, but to put it in Trini terms, would you rather spend your day traveling to the branch, waiting in line, or would you rather have your transaction done in a matter of minutes and then spend your time with your family or liming at your favorite place? That's the trade-off. It's convenience above everything else.
Well done. I had to teach my aunt last week what liming meant, so I appreciate the use of the word. Yes, you heard it here first, guys.
Well, I am based in Ontario, and I have spent a fair bit of time in Trinidad. Not of late, thanks to the pandemic, and I can't wait to get back because I just can't get doubles here.
Well, and I mean, you had to come with that sunblock when last you get that sun hit in your face,
Indeed.
All right. So, there are different types of people in terms of their stages with banking, because you have, Granny who types in HTTPS and is typing out everything. You have somebody who, like me, who I just basically want everything on my phone. And then you have the newbie who has just gotten their first job, gonna get their salary sent directly to their bank. What is the bank doing to make sure you're speaking to those three individuals?
Well, we have, and certainly for RBC, but I think all of the banks in the region have an equal view on this, that what's important for us is that we are reaching customers in their lives where they are. We use the phrase often, being on our customer's journey. So the idea that you have to interact with us in specific ways, there are things that we know that the face-to-face relationship is important. The advice and the conversation that our staff can provide is an important part of the conversation. And so we're available for all of those things. But when you talk about sort of the view for the customer, is like, well, it depends what you're doing in the day. Not every interaction you have is exactly the same. Some things I don't want to spend any time thinking about. I just want it to happen. I don't want to spend time worrying about where my paycheck is and can I get it cash and is it deposited. If I know that it just comes from an employer directly into my bank account on a regular basis and I don't have to think about it, I find that much more liberating and one less thing for me to worry about. On the other hand, I may have another conversation where I simply don't know the answer and I would like to talk to somebody, and it might be on the phone or it might be in person. It might be in person at a branch, or it might be in person with a banker who's able to travel. The banks want to be able to reach our customers in all of those ways so that we can be providing the best advice and the best service based on what the customer needs to do, and not assuming that every customer needs to do everything exactly the same way.
And let's talk about the bottom line, which is the economic impact. What are some of the changes or the shifts of somebody who has to do walk into the bank to do certain things versus online? Like, what's like the three key elements of that customer?
I think for us, there's sort of value for service. What are the things that because it costs different amounts of money to perform different things, and so you'll see that reflected in banks in terms of their fees. And in many cases, what we're offering is not only is there the convenience of doing things in a self-serve way at an ATM, at point of sale, or online. But we're trying to make that so that that's not just easier and faster, but it's actually cheaper as well. In some cases, there's things that we look at economically and go, we need to do this in the most effective way, because that's how we do our best to keep fees and prices down for your customers.
Welcome back. Thank you so much for joining us today on Straight Off the Bat, a show that covers so much information, more specifically about your financial status, because we want to be able to share knowledge on key issues surrounding economic development in Trinidad and Tobago. If you're joining us from YouTube, smash that subscribe button and continue seeing content to help you manage your money, because we all need this. Today, we're discussing the role of data and digital banking in Trinidad and Tobago with David Hewick, and he's joining us from Ontario, which is in Canada, which I think is cold now. Is it cold today, David?
We are finally getting to the spring and summer seasons in Canada, so I'm looking forward to hot for us, which would be in the mid-20s. That's cold for TT, I know, but it's warm enough for Canadians to wear a t-shirt and sit outside and relax.
Depends on the Canadian, because sometimes I see you all in flip-flops and I'm like, what? Why? All right. So as someone who has a wealth of knowledge over 30 years in this space, as well as, working with RBC Caribbean, what can you tell us about this cybersecurity space? Because when we have our information online, then we're open to this world wide web of people trying to not just get our information, but who else we may be discussing, because we've had guests in the past actually from RBC Caribbean as well that spoke to us about social engineering. So I don't know where exactly you want to touch that as it relates to data and digital banking in Trinidad and Tobago.
Sure. Yeah, it's a great conversation, and it's a hard one because there's so many ways that the bad guys out in the world have so many sophisticated ways of getting information about you. And what the banks do is we put a lot of energy into what we can control. We can control the way our systems are built. We can control the ways that we enable access to our systems. We spend a lot of time monitoring the world in terms of what the threats are and what's happening in terms of cybercrime. And for some of the banks, RBC included, where we have a large global parent, we get advantage to having good insight to that stuff. So we go to great lengths to protect our infrastructure, to protect, to build our capabilities, our apps and our online in ways that make them very, very secure. Those are things we can control. What we can't control is what others outside the bank are doing and how our customers are working on. So we want to do as much as we can to educate our customers on how they can protect themselves. And social engineering is a great example. People, the social engineering things that happen can be very sophisticated, that somebody will pose in convincing ways to be other than who they say they are. Maybe a bank, maybe not, maybe something else, maybe a service person, and they're having a quick call just to verify some piece of information. I just want to confirm that you live here, or that your address is this, or for our records, could you tell us this? You should be suspicious of those kinds of calls, whether it's an SMS or a phone call or an email that's asking you information about yourself. If you don't already know who you're talking to and why they're asking you, you should be suspicious. Because what the bad guys do is use all of these different ways to get little bits of information about you. And then they bring all those little bits together and create a good convincing picture of you that they will then use to go and attempt to defraud you, or attempt to go to, say, a financial institution and use that information to convince the financial institution that they're actually you. And that's when the social engineering kind of gets around all the system, is if I know everything about you and I can convince a bank that I'm actually you and get access to your accounts, then that's a problem. So it starts with being good and being educated about how those things come about, and being naturally suspicious of anybody that's trying to get stuff from you in terms of personal information, so that you can protect yourself. Your identity gets stolen. It can manifest in lots of ways. Not just your banking gets compromised, but you find people buying stuff using your credit card online that isn't you. You find people going out and doing other things. And at the end of the day, it's your information and you need to protect it about yourself.
We want to get a magic 8-ball and find out what he thinks about the evolution of digital banking for the next 5 to 10 years. What say you? What should we be looking out for?
I don't know if my crystal ball is that good for 10 years in the future, but I can tell you I'm excited about many directions that are many things that are going and all heading in certain directions. I would say certainly from a financial services perspective in banking, we are continuing down this path of finding new ways to make access to all of your financial services better and faster, and to make your ability to do payments, to buy things, for that to be faster. And those are things that are happening across the industry, and those are things that are happening at each of those banks. I'm excited to if I use my crystal ball for some of the other things that might be coming that aren't just over the horizon, but as you hear things about big data and AI and all of the machine learning and sort of those fancy technologies, what does that really mean? I'm excited that is going to make us even better at protecting you, at finding and anticipating the things that you want to do, and making it easier and faster for you to do those things without nearly as much hassle. Getting to a point where it isn't an ordeal to log on because you can't remember your password, or you don't have things written down, or you don't have your secret code ready. That I see an evolution where being able to interact online and through your phone with any number of industries, including banking, that's going to get much easier, much safer, and the number of things you're going to be able to do is going to get even greater.
And do you think, because we are living in a world now where we use our face to open the phones, our finger to, verify certain things. Do you see that being included in the banking space? Absolutely.
Yeah. There's in many jurisdictions around the world, that's already true. And even those are getting more sophisticated. It's not just your face or just your fingerprint. It might be, if I'm pretty confident that's your fingerprint and simultaneously pretty confident that that's your face, and I know it's on your phone, then I'm very certain it's you. And if I can get to a state where I can do that with very good confidence, then do I really need a password from you? It's more important that I know who you are, not that I know that you remember your password. And I see the technology getting to a state where that will become increasingly possible.
All right, this is the last futuristic question before we end this session. We have this Terminator view on technology, and Matrix is like, this is a thing, and people tend to deny the influence of Hollywood. because there's this belief that that's where we're going. And I think, I have some theories on the AI and things like that, but to put it in the context of not actually using it as a reason not to adopt to digital banking, what type of conversation would you have with that person?
I'd say these technologies, they sound sophisticated and they sound scary, but they're just tools. And it's a great note on Hollywood's influence. I think sometimes people don't realize just how much Hollywood actually influences what the technology becomes. Just anecdotally, the first engineers at Motorola that built the very first flip phone were inspired by watching Star Trek in the 60s. So some things that we see on TV are the reasons they become true. But the scary stuff, is AI going to turn into Skynet and Terminator is going to come and wipe us out? I'm not nearly so pessimistic about that. Like any tool, the tool can be used for good, the tool can be used for bad. But the better tools we have, the more exciting things we can do with them. So I remain optimistic that everything that we're doing is going to make life much better. And as long as we're sensible about how we choose to use those tools, then I think everything will be great.
I think that is the best way to end off this conversation, because ultimately that's what the internet is. That's what the camera is. These are all tools, and we are the ones behind these tools. So thank you so much, David, for joining us today and sharing insight into the role of data in digital banking in Trinidad and Tobago. Make sure to sign up and be notified for our next live show. Everything we discussed actually is available in the comment section for the links, and be sure to like and follow our page so you don't miss a single live show. Thank you so much for joining us today, and I'll see you soon. Bye.